right, who's ready to flip the house? Oh, thank you all for coming, and Linda, thank you for hosting. What a beautiful home, and what a lovely, we finally got lovely weather. And how nice to be out here with all of you, and thanks for taking time out of your day to help save America. So I'm running in California's 3rd Congressional District. This is a district that goes from the east suburbs of Sacramento, like Folsom and Roseville, all the way up into Lake Tahoe. And then it has this long stretch of the Eastern Sierra all the way from Chester and Lake Almanor down through Mammoth to Death Valley. Yeah, my district is about 500 miles long, and I know this because I hiked the whole thing on the Pacific Crest Trail. Yeah, my opponent did not. I'm actually 5 generations from this area. My great-great-grandparents, they crossed the Sierra on covered wagons. And unlike the Donner Party, they made it. And my great-grandmother Edith actually ran the telegraph booth at Donner Pass at the turn of the century. And so I grew up, I have all of my cousins are still in the area, huge family. And so I grew up in this area. We were a very outdoorsy family. My dad had us like fishing. I've caught fish in almost every river in the district. And we were always camping and hunting with all my uncles. And I recognize I'm in the Bay Area, so I just want to assure you that we only hunted organic and free-range pheasants. Yeah. So, I love and understand my community, and my parents were both school teachers. And so they had, any teachers in the house? Hey, good job. Thank you, teachers. My parents taught us this deep commitment to public service, that we really oriented our lives around giving back. So it was very natural for me to dedicate my career to service. And when I graduated from college, I joined the U.S. Agency for International Development. It's the humanitarian aid branch of the State Department. And they took one look at me and they said, "Jessica, you're hired and we're sending you to Baghdad." I was like, "Me? What?" So at the age of 23 in 2005, I went off to Iraq. And I was on the ground in Baghdad for a year and a half, standing side by side with our troops. And I saw firsthand, the impact that this war has on those who are serving. And I saw firsthand the impact that it has on their families when they're deployed. I also witnessed firsthand the impact the war was having on my Iraqi colleagues, because they were taking the same rocket fire and mortar fire that we were every single day, except they were going through this with their children. And I realized that if we can prevent war, we have to. If we can prevent conflict and suffering, we have to. So I dedicated then the next 10 years of my life to trying to prevent conflicts and crises around the world. I worked on everything from countering human trafficking to countering violent extremism and the rise of radical ideology in communities. Sound familiar? And later worked on nuclear nonproliferation. I worked for the State Department, I worked for the Defense Department, and spent my time working along these 3 pillars of national security: defense, development, diplomacy. And so I was working on this work, but then in 2018, I got a call from a friend who was up in Paradise. And she said, "A fire just broke out, we are in trouble, we need all hands on deck, can you come help?" And I was home, and so I said, "I'm coming." And so I went up and I just volunteered on the ground with the campfire relief efforts for the better part of a month. And I saw incredible courage among the survivors of this tragedy. This was the largest natural disaster in California history since the 1906 earthquake. I saw incredible courage, resilience, strength, sense of community. But I also saw on the faces of these 52,000 people who were impacted by this fire a look of trauma that I hadn't seen since I was on the ground in Baghdad. And here was a global scale catastrophe happening to our community, to my family, to my home, and I knew that we knew how to prevent it. I knew that we had the answers to wildfire, but we just hadn't scaled the solutions to the scale of the crisis. And so I was really honored to get appointed as the Deputy Secretary at the California Natural Resources Agency. And my job was wildfire resilience. It was a new role. How do we actually get ahead of the fires? How do we create a state that is able to withstand fire safely? And if you're wondering how I went from like nuclear nonproliferation to forestry and wildfire, my master's degree is a public policy degree, and so I basically learned like how to get things done in government. But my superpower that I learned was how to listen, and turn what I'm hearing into strategy and into budget, which doesn't sound super sexy when you do it, but man, it's effective. And so I listened. I brought together this incredible coalition of firefighters and fire scientists, of loggers and environmental leaders. I brought together tribal leaders and local government leaders, these unlikely coalitions, but everyone had a piece of the puzzle. And together we designed a strategy to start getting ahead of the crisis. And this includes everything from prescribed fire on the wildlands and reintroducing grazing and thinning out forests that are artificially dense so that they can be restored and accept fire. It includes putting in fire breaks around communities so that firefighters have a tactical place to steer a fire around a neighborhood, and that we have these along roads so that people can evacuate during big fires. And then the last area is the home hardening and defensible space, because we know that homes burn from the inside out when there's a fire. It's embers getting in through the attic vents and others. And so we do these interventions so that homes are less likely to ignite when embers are coming in. And if you do all three of those, you actually have a resilient state. When fire breaks out, it can actually play its natural ecological role rather than the catastrophic fires that devastate communities, devastate our watersheds, and so we can actually get ahead of the curve. So we designed this strategy, and I went to the legislature, and I said, hey, all of the watersheds are burning to a crisp, and we won't have water, Southern California, unless we fix this. And the Southern California legislators were like, oh. And so I was able to secure $3 billion in new funding through the state legislature for wildfire resilience prevention projects. And before we got the money, I went to the departments and CAL FIRE and others, and I said, hey, what would it take, once we get the appropriation, to get the projects on the ground within like 4 weeks? You know what they did? They laughed at me. And I said, no, talk me through it. They were like, no, this usually takes like a year or two to even start, and then 5 years to finish. I was like, the fires aren't waiting for our budget cycles, my friend. What do we need to do? And so they talked me through all of their hurdles. And together we worked through all of the regulatory and process hurdles, changed state contracting law, expedited our environmental review timeline. We didn't toss out environmental protections, but we made them effective and efficient. And so within 4 weeks of getting the funding, we had fire resilience projects on the ground throughout California. Within the first year, by the fire season of 2022, we had 1,200 projects ready for the fire season. And we saw the scale of the fire season decrease from about 2.5 million acres burned down to about 360,000 acres burned in the fall of in that 22 fire season. Yeah. We had the same number of fires and the same extreme conditions, but we were able to get ahead of the curve. And we know that progress on fire isn't going to be linear, right? But we know that we can't make progress until the federal government starts moving at the same pace that we just started modeling in the state. Because the federal government actually owns 57% of your wildlands in California. And I'm sure many of your properties abut federal land. And so making sure that that land is actually playing its ecological role rather than being an ecological liability is really vital. And that means we have to have some intervention on this land to make sure that it is actually protected rather than neglected. And so I want to make sure that we get the federal government rolling at this high pace. But you know who has not been doing this work? My opponent, Kevin Kiley. When he was in the state legislature, he voted against the $3 billion for wildfire resilience funding. And do you know why? He didn't want Democrats to have a win. I had huge bipartisan support for this program, but Kylie would rather play partisan games than actually deliver on fire safety for our community. Kevin Kiley, my opponent, he's a freshman in Congress right now, so he's highly vulnerable. He is described by Donald Trump as a MAGA champion in Congress. And that's who he's been carrying the water for. Kevin Kiley brought Jim Jordan out to the district to campaign for him in Roseville. I brought Adam Schiff to Roseville to campaign for me. And what I've been seeing is that Kiley has been exclusively focused on carrying the water and trying to normalize MAGA extremism in our own community. When I worked on countering violent extremism around the world, the trend we saw was that extremist ideology takes root in communities when local trusted voices normalize the extremist message. That is what Kevin Kiley is doing an hour and a half from you, right up the road. He hasn't been focused on the issues that are actually impacting the district. This is a district where almost everyone is losing their fire insurance, or their prices have doubled. Placer County, where Roseville is, has actually had the highest rate of fire insurance cancellations in the entire state. And Kiley, rather than holding insurance companies accountable, is just taking money from them for his campaign. We're also a district where PG&E has burned down millions of acres, jacked up rates for everybody, and cut off the water supply to Nevada City this summer. Do you think Kevin Kiley used his constitutional office to hold PG&E accountable, to shine light on the fact that one of our towns in California doesn't have water because of this company? No, instead, he brought up school teachers from Berkeley to his committee, and he said, "Why are your diversity programs corrupting children?" He brought up the Moms for Liberty candidates that he helped elect to the local school board in Rockland. Remember, Moms for Liberty is an extension of the Proud Boys. He helped get them elected to the school board. He brought them up in front of Congress, and he applauded them for banning books and outing trans children. And he said the Rockland School Board is the model he wants for the country, and Kevin Kiley is on the education committee. We have to get him out because he is dangerous. Finally, Kiley is incredibly dangerous for women. My district is 65% pro-choice. I am talking to women about this every single day in the district. The other day, I was out at a farmer's market in Roseville, and I was meeting a woman who's an OBGYN, and I said, "Thank you for your service, and I'm sorry that your job has turned into this political sacrifice, like that you are having to be so significant right now." And she said it's heart-wrenching because in Roseville, her office is filled with women flying in from other states who can't get treatment for their miscarriages. And in their moment of most profound grief and pain, they are getting on an airplane flying to California and having to heal and grieve alone away from their families. These laws are cruel. When I finished talking with her, another young woman came running up to me. She had overheard the conversation, and she said, "Jessica, I need you to get into office." And I said, "We're going to do it." And she said, "I have to tell you." She told me that she was a sexual abuse survivor, that she had started getting abused at age 12. And she had to have an abortion as a kid. And she said it is heart-wrenching for her to see women in other states and to have our rights being taken away. She said it causes her panic every time there's an abortion hearing in front of the Supreme Court or a federal judge where they might take away contraception. They might take away medication abortion. Our rights are ricocheting around the courts, and she said, "You have to stop this madness because it is traumatic for me to have to keep fighting this fight over and over." And I said to her, "We will. We are going to do it." Because Kevin Kiley is somebody who is actively pushing for a national abortion ban. He's already voted for one. And he's on the Republican Study Committee and pushing for a ban that is so extreme that it has no exemptions for rape. It would ban IVF. And if you function this law out, it will criminalize miscarriage. This is my opponent in the Sacramento suburbs. And we have to get him out. And what is exciting is that we can, and we will. Because of the incredible work that you are doing. I met a woman when I was at the Nevada County Fair the other day, and she was like, oh my gosh, I've already heard of you. Someone sent me a postcard. And another young woman who was working at a sandwich shop came rushing up to me, and she's probably maybe 20-ish, and she said, oh my God, are you Jessica Morse? And I was like, wow, I'm in like gym clothes. And no makeup. Yes, I am. How did you know? And she's like, someone called me from your campaign, so one of your phone banks, and she said, your message was so inspiring. I need you in office, and I'm going to work for you. This is a district where we have the numbers to win. Like I said, it is a solidly pro-choice district. It's a district that back in 2020, in the new boundaries, Trump won by 1 percentage point. We've gained 4 percentage points in Democratic voter registration since then. I am sitting in a Kamala Harris district today. It is a district where the top issues for people are wildfire, fire insurance, and reproductive freedom. Guess who's really well positioned on all three, right? So we are going to get this, and we are going to make it happen. And I am so proud of the work you are doing, because the civic actions that you are taking by making these calls, writing these postcards, coming out and knocking on doors changes the course of democracy. And you all know it. You are doing this work because you know it and because you see it. But I just want to anchor you with what anchors me whenever I feel a little overwhelmed, because it turns out quitting your job, running for Congress, living off your savings, it's quite the thing. I reread Abraham Lincoln's very first speech to remind myself where we sit in history today. This was a speech he delivered in 1838. So decades before the Civil War broke out. And in it, he identified every single trend that was already present in America that eventually did lead to the Civil War. And he warned them, and he warns us, that the vehicle that will end the great American experiment will be weak congressmen who prioritize their own political power over the country and the Constitution. I've got a weak congressman, and we have the power and the responsibility to unseat him and replace him with a strong congresswoman. Yeah. By the way, you want a shocking fact? I am the only woman flipping a competitive House seat in California. Out of the 10 battleground seats in California, I'm the only one. Yeah. In a year where we went from, I think, 20 women Democrats representing California in Congress in 2018, we're down to 15 women Democrats representing us today, and then 5 are retiring, and only 1 of those is actually getting replaced by a woman. So if we're like, hey, how are we going to secure reproductive rights? Let's elect women. So I am so proud of all of you, because when we think about this moment we are at in history, we are not waiting for a battlefield. We can defeat this and vanquish this foe at the ballot box. Historically, these trends, these authoritarian movements, they do not gain power in one election, and they aren't vanquished in one election. It is the work of a decade, and that is the work that we have been doing. And that is the work that we will continue today for the next 50 days, so that we can actually get this work done, because you are changing the trajectory of history with civic engagement. And I am so honored to be part of this movement with you. I am so proud to stand in this moment in history, because few generations have a burden this heavy, but also few generations have an opportunity to change the course of history and cement democracy from your living rooms, from your neighborhoods, from your state. We can do this, and we can do this from home. And so I am so grateful and proud to be here with all of you, because when your grandchildren and great-grandchildren ask what you were doing during the MAGA era, you're going to be able to proudly tell them that you saw the need, you saw the opportunity, and you are doing everything in your power to change it. And then you're going to tell them you're welcome. So thank you so much for your support. Yeah. Let's go out there and win some history.